The last transmission from colony vessel, Aethen's Hope, lasted 11 seconds before the signal cut to static. Breach on decks 4 through 9. We have civilians trapped. Repeat. We have over 3,000 civilians trapped with no evacuation route. This is not a drill, this is a Eurostatic. Fleet Commander Yara Osi sat in the command chair of the ESV Providence and watched the transmission log replay for the 4th time, her jaw tight. Behind her, the bridge crew waited in silence for an order that, by every rule of engagement humanity had ever agreed to with the wider galactic community, she had no legal authority to give. The Aethen's Hope belonged to the Corvith Assembly of Euros, a species that 6 years earlier had voted unanimously against admitting Earth into any regional defense pact, citing humanity's unpredictable temperament and insufficient technological maturity. The Corvith had rejected every human alliance offer since first contact. They had never once asked Earth for help. They weren't asking now either. The distress call hadn't even been directed at humanity. It had gone out on an open emergency frequency, meant for any Corvith vessel within range. None had answered. The nearest Corvith fleet was 4 days out. The Providence was 11 hours away. "Commander," her tactical officer said quietly, "Central Command hasn't authorized intervention. If we go in without Corvith consent, this could be treated as an act of war." Yara didn't look away from the screen, where the timestamp on that final transmission kept counting upward, a clock ticking on 3,000 lives that weren't hers to save and weren't hers to lose. "Get me a channel to Earth Command," she said, "and plot a course to Aethen's Hope. We're leaving in 5 minutes, authorized or not." None of this had started with that distress call, though. To understand why a human fleet commander was willing to risk an interstellar incident for a species that had spent 6 years rejecting her people, you had to go back 3 years, to a much smaller rescue that almost nobody in the galaxy ever heard about. Earth's relationship with the wider galactic community had never been an easy one. Humanity had entered known space 9 years earlier, through a chance encounter with a damaged Threll trading vessel, and in the years since, Earth had applied for membership in nearly every regional alliance within reach of Euros, the Corvith Assembly among them a Euros, and been rejected by most. The reasons varied. Some species distrusted humanity's rapid technological growth. Others cited Earth's turbulent history of internal conflict as proof of instability. The Corvith Assembly's rejection had been the most public and the most humiliating of Euros. A formal statement broadcast across a dozen systems, describing humans as a species too young to be trusted with the responsibilities of interstellar cooperation. Most human leaders had wanted to respond with proportional coldness, cut ties, focus resources on species willing to reciprocate. It would have been the easier path, and no one would have blamed them for taking it. Admiral Desmond Achebe, head of Earth's newly formed expeditionary fleet, argued for something different. "We don't earn respect by matching their coldness," he told the Unified Defense Council. "We earn it by proving them wrong about who we are, whether they're watching or not." It was a controversial policy. Critics called it naive a Euro, helping species that had rejected Earth, expecting nothing in return. But Achebe was given limited authority to test it, and 3 years before the Aethen's Hope distress call, that policy faced its first real test. A small Vess mining outpost, isolated and struggling after a reactor failure, sent out a quiet, almost embarrassed request for emergency medical supplies of Euros, not to Earth, but to any nearby vessel that might happen to hear it. The Vess had never had formal contact with humanity at all. A single Earth medical frigate, the Amura Solis, happened to be 9 hours away. Its captain, a young officer named Priya Nair, made the same choice Yaris Ose would later make. She went, without waiting for authorization that might never come in time. What Priya Nair found at the Vess outpost changed more than just the fate of that colony. The reactor failure had triggered a slow radiation leak that the Vess's own limited medical technology couldn't treat. Without intervention, the colony's youngest and oldest residents a Euros, nearly 400 people a Euros, would have died within days. The Amara Solis carried radiation treatment technology, decades ahead of anything the Vess possessed, developed originally for Earth's own early, dangerous experiments with fusion power. Priya's medical team worked for 72 straight hours, treating every affected colonist, repairing the failing reactor with spare parts fabricated on board, and asking for nothing in return of Euros. Not trade rights, not political favor, not even formal acknowledgement. The Vess elder who oversaw the outpost, an elderly and deeply skeptical woman named Ket Ilvara, asked Priya directly why humanity had come at all, given that the Vess had no formal alliance with Earth and no ability to repay the debt. Priya's answer was simple. Because you asked, and we were close enough to hear you. Ket Ilvara never forgot those words. Neither did the wider galactic community. Once the story of an unaffiliated human medical frigate saving an entire Vess colony without expecting anything in return began to spread. Euros quietly at first, then with growing momentum, through trade routes and diplomatic channels alike. It didn't change everything overnight. The Corvith Assembly, in particular, remained openly dismissive, dismissing the Vess rescue as an isolated act, not a pattern. But it planted a question in enough minds, across enough species that 3 years later, when the Aethen's Hope sent its final desperate transmission, more than one commander in more than one fleet found themselves thinking of Earth first. Aboard the Providence, Fleet Commander Yara Osei's gamble came with real risk. Corvith military doctrine treated unauthorized entry into their territory, even during an active emergency, as a potential hostile act. If the Providence arrived, and Corvith defense forces misread their intentions, the rescue could become a battle before a single evacuation shuttle even launched. Yara had a plan for that too. Open every channel, she told her communications officer. As the Providence dropped out of translite above the burning wreck of Aethen's Hope, Corvith emergency frequencies, civilian bands, everything. I want them to see us before they have any reason to assume the worst. The message she broadcast was short, direct, and unmistakably honest. This is Fleet Commander Yara Osei of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress call. We are not here to claim territory or demand concessions. We are here because you asked for help and no one else was close enough to answer. Please stand down defensive systems and allow immediate evacuation assistance. For nearly a full minute, there was no response at all. A euro, the longest minute of Yara's career. Then a shaking voice, barely audible over the sound of alarms in the background, answered. This is Aethen's Hope Evacuation Control. We Euros, we don't have authority to accept outside assistance without assembly approval, but we don't have time to wait for it either. Please, help us. Yara didn't hesitate. Launching rescue shuttles now. Hold on. What followed was 6 hours of the kind of controlled chaos that no simulation could have fully prepared the Providence crew for. The colony vessel's hull breach had spread faster than initial reports suggested, cutting off entire evacuation routes and trapping survivors in isolated, rapidly depressurizing sections. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, leading the primary rescue team, made the call that would later be remembered as the turning point of the entire operation. Faced with a collapsed corridor separating rescue teams from nearly 600 trapped Corvith civilians on Deck 7, Webb ordered his team to manually cut through a reinforced bulkhead, using equipment never designed for that purpose. A decision that risked both his team's lives and the ship's remaining structural integrity. It worked. Barely. The bulkhead gave way with less than 4 minutes of breathable atmosphere remaining on the other side. By the time the last evacuation shuttle cleared, Aethen's Hope's hull, the Providence, and its crew had saved 2,941 Corvith lives. 59 had been lost before the human fleet ever arrived. A euro, a number that weighed on Yara Osei far more heavily than any of the praise that followed. The Corvith Assembly's formal response, delivered 3 weeks later, was not the grudging, minimal acknowledgement many had expected. Elder Ket Ilvara a Euros, the same Vess leader whose colony had been saved 3 years earlier, now serving as an invited cultural liaison to the Corvith government. A Euros, insisted on addressing the Assembly Council personally before their vote. 6 years ago, she told them, your assembly called humanity too young to trust. I would ask you to consider what trust actually looks like. It doesn't look like a species that helps only when it benefits them. It looks like a fleet commander who broke protocol to save 3,000 people who had rejected her species for years, expecting nothing in return. The vote to formally recognize Earth as an allied power passed with the widest margin in Corvith Assembly history. Fleet Commander Yara Osei never framed the Aethen's Hope rescue as a victory. When asked by Earth's press corps what she wanted people to remember about that day, she gave an answer that would be repeated across a dozen worlds in the months that followed. I don't want anyone to remember what we did, she said. I want them to remember why we did it. Not for approval, not for alliance. Because somewhere out there, someone was crying for help, and we were close enough to hear them. A Euros. And being close enough to help is never a good enough reason to walk away.